Welcome to Taxbytes for Expats, the top tax tips you want to know as an expat. The podcast is here to help answer the common queries and concerns expats have when moving to or from Ireland. Complex taxes explained simply. We'll focus on the Irish and international tax issues to be aware of to ensure you save time, money, and stress.
Avoid the hassle of dealing with your bank and transfer online, by app or over the phone or Currencies Direct today. Keep listening for an exclusive offer for Taxbytes for Expats listeners, and thanks to Currencies Direct for their support of this podcast. Hi everyone, welcome back to this episode of Taxbytes for Expats. Thanks for joining us. Today I am joined by Andrew Rhatigan of Rhatigan Real Estate. Andrew has carved out a very thoughtful niche in the Irish property world, not just about showing people houses, but also helping them understand the culture, process, and the unspoken norms that can catch people off guard when they move to Ireland. The whole approach that he has is about clarity over pressure, and his people-first mindset is something that I know many of our listeners will really appreciate, particularly if they're trying to figure out how the Irish property market actually works in practice. Andrew's work, from his advisory model to his podcast and community, centres on translating the experience rather than just completing a transaction. Andrew, thank you very much for coming on and joining us.
Absolute pleasure. Delighted to be here.
I always love having people on when they actually have their own podcasts, and you have a very successful podcast, which I really hope that we're going to get a chance to talk about today. I feel we will. But before we do that, please expand on my introduction. Tell us what brought you to this line of work, a little bit about your background, and why you find yourself at this junction where you're working with a similar group of people that we work with at Expats, expattaxes.ie.
Absolutely. So essentially, I suppose when I look at the thread of my life, it's funny, we all look back in hindsight and see little moments in time that are part of our personality, but we overlook them at the time. So all throughout my life, I always liked the idea of starting a business, doing something. If I wanted a car, I went and worked for it. I cut grass, we washed cars, valeting, whatever else it may be. And what was interesting about that was my father was an entrepreneur. He was a business owner. He was a builder, a developer. And I was surrounded by that in the 80s and 90s, which was really at the real precipice of that transition between, risks that people take. And my house was full of plasterers, builders, and people looking for opinions all the time. So I always loved that. But I think I ignored it or didn't realize the role it played in that kind of interpersonal piece for me. So as I grew up, when I came to finishing school, I was with my guidance counselor. And it's a funny story because I remember thinking, what would sound good at a dinner party? Because at the time when I was 18, I hadn't a breeze who I was, what I wanted. I didn't have this accountancy blood running through my veins where I thought, I know I'm going to be X. So I went for psychology. And what was interesting about that was psychology became the opportunity for me to learn more about myself and then layer in my personality as I went through it. But what I noticed a trend throughout it was I was fascinated in potential. I was fascinated by people and I loved relationships. But at the core of that was kind of sales. There was always sales in whatever I did. So I used to clean in a hospital during college, but I also sold at the RDS. We used to bring things over from different countries and sell them. And, you're trying to sell robot lawnmowers before they became sexy, bean bags before anyone knew what they were. I was that guy as you passed me at the equivalent home fair trying to grab you and get you to sit on it.
I would.
Excuse me, sir, are you tired of sitting up straight? So when we did that essentially, but all of that basically baked into who I was, which was people and selling. And anything I did as I began to go through my professional career, I never had a specific linear line where I said, right, I'm going to start here and work my way up. So there was a period of my life where I thought, okay, well, my natural inclination was to try things, to give it a go, which is that kind of, startup mode where you have an idea or a concept or a hypothesis, and then you build on it. And I went into the car business because I had an idea for a platform, and I worked for free in a difficult time in the market to understand what was really involved and what was at the crux of that challenge for people. And what was interesting about it was the exact same as property. Issues with trust, issues with decision-making, your needs versus your wants, and then all the various stakeholders that are involved. So while I was building that platform, my wife said, look, yes, you're going to be Elon Musk. It's going to be great. It's obviously going to take off, but would you humor me by keeping your hand in studying property. And I said, okay, fine, I'll do it. But we all know I'm going to be this way. So I did that throughout. And as I was in the car business and built the platform, I enjoyed it, but I found property drawing me in a little bit further. And there came a point where I realized I'd be building something in tech for the sake of the exit, as opposed to for the sake of enjoying what I'm doing. And I suppose I have a keen awareness of time because both my parents passed quite young. And when I look at what I was planning on doing, I thought, okay, well, I'm enjoying property. Where could this go? And then cut to working with Janet Carroll in Blackrock in South County Dublin. She was a fantastic mentor, great person. And she's she's got a great personality and she's very good at what she does. Thoroughly enjoyed working with her for a number of years. And then when COVID hit, I kind of had my come to Jesus moment, which was, we were talking about it before camera. My youngest was about to be born. And I thought, maybe there's an opportunity for me to explore all the things I've built up over a period of years and create something unique in property.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went from starting a general agency, which was, if you're at a dinner party, what does Andrew do? Oh, well, he does sales and lettings and everything else in between. And then I began to notice a niche and a requirement for people, which was they needed a guidance and advocate, someone to advocate for them as opposed to simply transacting. So I began to lean into that side of it. And then I did away with the rest. And with the help of my business mentor, I basically doubled down and said no to business for the sake of it. So I had an opportunity to sell some new builds. I had an opportunity to do all that stuff. And on paper, in the short term, it made sense. But something in me said, no, you have to keep looking at this particular piece because that's what kind of lit me up. And here we are today.
Wow, I love it. So one of the things that jumped out to me when I was, kind of introducing you there is this idea of clarity over pressure. Your background, you've said, you found yourself drawn to sales, but now I suppose the psychology part allows you to give people clarity. What does that look like when you work with someone? I presume you're not selling them the property that they're buying. Is that right? Where do you come into the whole transaction?
Absolutely. So the biggest misconception people have, especially if they're living abroad, is that when you're a buying agent, that you have some sort of association with agents. I'm not going to pretend I don't get along well with agents, that they're my colleagues and my professional peers, but there is no splitting of fees. There is no deals in the background to try and convince someone to buy something. So what turns the process on its head when people meet me is that my motivation or my modus operandi is actually to get to what you're not telling me. And it's quite jarring for a lot of people because I meet people who are successful, they have money, they're used to going somewhere, and generally people look at them and say, what piece of the pie can I get for this particular transaction or information? And then move them on. I've talked people out of buying property because they don't need to. And they look at me kind of thinking, but do you not have listings or do you not want my business? And I said, it's not about not wanting business. I want to build for the long term. So when someone comes to me, they essentially have a hypothesis of what they think they want. And what's funny about property is you'll buy a jacket faster than you will buy a property, but your motivation behind both are quite similar. But a jacket is a smaller purchase, so you can overcome the mistakes you made, the fact that it was too small, the fact that it didn't last as long as you thought, or that it was a color you knew you wouldn't wear. So with property, what I do is people come to me and they always have a super list of coming across very clear as to what they want. But what they may overlook is the fact that a south-facing garden is one of their absolutely must-haves, but their other half doesn't care. They just want a man cave. Someone may want a beautiful house with lots of space outside of Dublin, but guess what? They spend their life in a first-class lounge and their other half is the one who's doing the school run. And that could be an hour and a half, 2 hours round trip every day, which breeds resentment. That has nothing to do with bricks and mortar, but everything to do with how you live. So when people come to me, they say what they think they want. And I thoughtfully and patiently, I suppose the best way, respectfully, pick it apart. So instead of you coming to me and saying, I've got 2 million quid or £1 million or €1 million, I want this 2-bedroom house in Sandymount. I go, okay, great. Why? What is it? And it almost becomes the 5 whys, because at the end of it, I've had people thinking of buying large houses so they can show it off at this time of year. They have 2 great drawing rooms. They'll spend 20 to 30,000 upgrading it so it looks lovely, like just for Christmas, by the way. They can bring people in they mightn't be very fond of just to do this.
Wow.
And then at the end of the day, they have to live in it. So by sitting and looking them in the eye, appreciating what they've achieved, which is so important, because when you see someone who's successful or has the means, it's seeing the person themselves. But the reality is they've been rewarded for one area of their life, but they're the exact same as you, that they haven't a clue what they're doing in a lot of other areas.
Yes.
Just because they've been rewarded for this particular part doesn't mean they know all the answers. And the mistake that people make is assuming that the money element means you have it all sorted. So I try and provide another piece of the puzzle, which is a discrete outlet for people to have that conversation. And I've had people who are on the verge of breaking up. I've had people who've had issues with someone who passed away, with banks, and they need someone who won't give them the head tilt and shy away from that conversation. So I've had someone who said to me, if this going on, whatever it may be, okay, here's my list. And I said, here's the list, and it's going to the side. We're now going to spend an hour and a half talking about you and what you've got going on. And it's not about it being therapeutic. I'm not portraying to be someone who gives them all the answers, but I give them a platform to talk about the stuff that is usually holding them back from making the right decision later on. Because people don't, a property agent, a lot of the time, even selling, won't tell you everything. So you could have someone that's going through a challenging time, and at the last hurdle, they say, oh, by the way, my life's falling apart. My husband or wife is in hospital, and this is happening with the property. But they don't tell the one person who's intimately involved in the process. So I try and front load all of that by saying, we're having a private conversation. It goes nowhere. I don't drink, so I'm not going to be telling anyone in the pub. And then let's find the right answer for you as opposed to find a property. I can sell you anything. I can convince you that Dalkey's where you need to be, or wherever it needs to be based on a budget. What if someone told you what you needed based on what you were saying and then didn't have any vested interest in you buying or not? Like, that's the whole point behind the process.
It's a clarity piece without the pressure. Yeah, and I know we were talking before we started to record about our own personal experience, or my own personal experience about going through a buying process for a property, and it's huge. It's and I live in Ireland, and I relocate close to home. When someone's coming to Ireland from abroad, because obviously you work with a lot of people in that group, what are the quirks of the Irish system that you think surprise people? Obviously, the issues you've alluded to are common, regardless of who you are. They're probably complicated when you're coming from abroad, but what are the quirks that kind of people don't anticipate before they come here?
So a few simple ones would be, I suppose, the idea that the price, if it's for sale, I want that one. And not understanding that no matter how much money they have, the property may be on the market for months or minutes, and it may already be agreed. So the challenge for them is understanding the role that people play isn't just because they have the means to buy something. It's understanding that you could have 10 properties in the same area for sale at the same time, and they all have 12 different stories. So one person who wants to sell something and it's a simple transaction, they want X amount of money and they're done, is different to a family breakup, is different to someone who's selling a property because someone passed away. So when someone comes from abroad, they see a portal, they see things for sale, and they assume they can simply buy it. But they don't understand the price point isn't necessarily going to be it's not like an Amazon where they can buy it straight away. And the second thing they overlook is the fact that they assume because they have money that they have clout. So when they come here, they assume that people will drop everything and they'll say, wow, there's someone from another country that has money. Let's give them the time of day. But the reality is you have busy agents. The system doesn't lend itself to quality interactions. It lends itself to quantity interactions.
Yeah.
So people get annoyed at agents who are jangling 100 keys trying to open a door and they mightn't return a call. But the reality is agents are on the cold face. They're doing far too much for what they should be doing relative to building relationships. So when someone comes from abroad, they don't realize that someone's trying to vet them or profile them based on what they do. So if I'm in New York and I send one email about Penthouse 123 in Merrion Road and Paul's Bridge, I am just one of 100 people who sent an email. But guess what? If Mary Sheehan, who's from Paul's Bridge, sends an email or walks by or picks up the phone at a normal time of day, they've cut through the queue. So it's pricing first and foremost, it's assuming they can buy it. Secondly is the nuances of not being in Ireland, as in they assume they can simply just, like booking a hotel room, if it's available, I'll take it.
Yeah.
And that's not the case. And it's so nuanced with every property. It all has its own story. And the third is proximity. I think they assume, that they maybe have sold the idea, and we all know, and I'm localizing it from America, but let's just say an American perspective. They could come over for 6 days and they go through 28 counties and do 48 activities every day. And they think they want a certain location. And the difficulty there is they're not understanding that the moment in time when they were on a curated tour is not the everyday life when you don't have the crowds, you don't have the weather, you don't have the support. So probably the surprising thing that they enjoy is the fact that, and a lot of what I do is showing people what they think they want. So even in how we work, it's quite interesting. We had clients 3 years ago and they thought they wanted the sunny southeast. And I baked it into the criteria, but I basically did a Top Gear style tour of the southeast, looking at all the properties they thought they wanted and showing them this is a beautiful location. This is great. There is one coffee shop to the left and there's a fish factory to the right and there is nothing else. And if they were abroad, someone would have taken their booking deposit, they would have flown over and would have gone through that heartache. So a lot of that is that kind of translation piece. But it's just those blind spots from being abroad that people don't understand. The benefits of Ireland are we're so small. It's a great place to build a community and connect with people. In 10 minutes, I can find someone who knows you. But the difficulty is you can't apply another jurisdiction to here because it just won't work.
And now a quick word on our episode sponsor, Currencies Direct. If you're looking for a fast, easy way to transfer money to or from Ireland without the hassle and cost of dealing with your bank, keep it simple with Currencies Direct. Whether you're buying property or require regular currency transfers, Currencies Direct can help you save money. As a special offer for our listeners, when you use the link in the show notes and quote expat taxes when registering with Currencies Direct, you'll receive a €50 one-for-all or Amazon voucher when you transfer €5,000 or more in your first 6 months with Currencies Direct. Registration is quick and easy, and you decide how you transfer 24/7 via their online money transfer service, over the phone with one of their friendly experts, or by using their handy mobile app. Check the show notes or head to currenciesdirect.com to register, and thanks to Currencies Direct for the support of this podcast. Yeah, totally. And you hit on something there that I always try to kind of explain to my clients as well. But I'll give you an example. When we came back from Australia, we struggled to find rental because the market was just so busy. And I just went, okay, we have a problem. What are we going to do? So I went in to our local estate agent, or the estate agent that we thought would have a good selection of properties we liked. Realised that the girl behind the desk was a friend of a friend. Had a chat with her, left her my phone number. When I would ring, I would ask for her. We would talk. We got a property. She rang me and told me that something was on the market. Now, that feels a little bit like underhand. It's not. That's just how business is done here. And I think particularly in the property market, you cannot compare booking.com and daft.ie in terms of how they both operate. You made that point. So to try and be aware of that or fast track that by using somebody in Ireland has implicit value, especially when you're bringing to the table all those other insights that are just not obvious when you look at somewhere. The process of buying in Ireland, we're talking about kind of expectations. Do you find there's any other parts of the buying process that are surprising for expats who either, maybe have never bought in Ireland before, are returning Irish, or people moving to Ireland for the first time from overseas?
Probably the timeline, because no matter how proactive someone is, and this is again down to the nuances, but you could have legals on one side that if the stars align and both solicitors are phenomenal communicators, it can appear that it moved very well. And the worst thing that can happen to someone when they go to a dinner party with a fellow expat is that the stars aligned in that particular situation, but that is the exception rather than the rule.
Mm-hmm.
So when people come over, they need to plan accordingly. So I say to anybody, if I gave you this property today and we went through the legal process, based on my understanding of this particular building or this particular development, and let's say their chosen solicitor, I know this isn't going to happen until February. And it's nothing against it. This isn't solicitor bashing. It's just the way the system is working at the moment. Mm-hmm. We're in that transitional period where e-conveyancing is coming down the line essentially. And people are kind of both embracing it and fighting it, but neither is an absolute guarantee as yet. So you're going to have old world solicitors that still communicate via letter. It's the classic heretofore, I'm requesting the BER, versus picking up the phone and saying, Andrew, will you send the BER and I'll send you an official email. So you have it for your records. I think the timing is a big thing because in America, for example, it could be you view it on Thursday, you make your offers, it comes to a head by Monday, Tuesday, and then they accept an offer and you have a binding contract. It's an escrow for kind of 28, 30 days. No contingencies. Here it's, oh yeah, well, he said he'll accept the offer, but he's going to meet his uncle now who has a friend who's coming over, and he's just wants to make sure that the friend isn't, and you're like, this, nothing is binding, nothing is guaranteed, and the timeline is one that people need to plan for.
Actually, let's talk a little bit about that. So bought a house in Ireland, forgotten the process. So you make an offer, you pay a booking deposit. Tell me about the booking deposit. What does that mean? Should we confuse that with anything binding is probably my point.
No. So the best way to describe a booking deposit is it means it is a glorified handshake. And all it does is shows that you have a statement of intent to proceed as best you can. And the difficulty for people when they put that booking deposit is because 10 or 20 or 30 grand leaves their bank account, they assume they have purchased something, i.e. peace of mind. All they have done is declare their intent to continue the process to buy that property. And the seller has done so by, let's say, taking it off the market or marking it sale agreed in some cases, not all cases. But the reality is it's an agreement or a handshake to move ahead with the legal process. But the way of looking at it and neutralizing it twofold is just because I see a property with you today and I put a deposit on it, that doesn't preclude me from traveling all around Ireland with another 150 grand and putting 10 deposits on lots of other properties just for peace of mind. And it doesn't stop the seller knocking on every door in their estate, trying to see if they can get a better offer. So the nuance here again is profiling the particular buyer and understanding what their particular, and the seller, and understanding what their version of winning is. Because if you have a seller that is clear cut, let's say when I sold my property a number of years ago, I looked someone in the eye, and I won't swear, but I said, don't mess me around.
Mm-hmm.
I did not say that. I said it far clearer, but I used that opportunity to say, I want this amount of money right now. There's an opportunity cost because I could lose 50 grand. If I kept it bidding, I might have made more, but I then couldn't have made an offer on a house I wanted.
Yeah, you're in a chain.
So that was a pragmatic. Someone else just wants more. So even when I agree to them, they might have a languishing feeling of maybe there's an extra few, a few quid to get. And the worst that happens over Christmas is you have family, friends and fools that all give you their opinion, even though they're not buying it. And then all it takes is 2 weeks of someone sitting over, drinks and family get-togethers by thinking, you know what, I could get an extra 30,000 euro. And the difficulty in Ireland is it's understanding all those pieces, because that's the stuff that people overlook. It's not the bricks, like it's 90% people and 10% property.
Really?
And it's understanding. Oh, it's completely. Like the phrase I learned in the car business was the buyer is a liar. We all lie to ourselves as to why we're buying something, why a seller is doing something. And like, I'm very objective because I've sold like both my dad died at 51, my mum died at 60, and I had to sell both of their houses. And I'm at the front door and I heard things that people say about my dad and my dad's house. They didn't know who I was at the time.
Oh.
But I can be objective because I can separate myself and say, well, this is a house and this is what's happening around. But the reason I say that is my unique skill set is objectivity. I can take myself out of something and understand what needs to happen. Whereas you can have someone else that is hugging the door of a house that they built themselves and it's been taken by virtue of, let's say, separation. So someone there, no amount of money is going to heal the pain with that particular person.
Yeah.
So how do you appeal to them without using your checkbook? So in that situation, it may be time. So when someone puts in a bid on something, I could say, look, we're not going to go for X amount of money. What we are going to do is give you the time. And suddenly for that person, that's the difference. So when people look at the booking deposit, they think I've paid the booking deposit, happy days. And a lot of the time they take the foot off the gas and then they don't realize that's when you're at your most vulnerable on both sides because the balance of power shifts.
To the seller?
At different stages, the balance of power will shift between buyer and seller. So when you go sale agreed, the balance of power has shifted to the buyer because the seller is no longer on the market. They're no longer bringing people through the property and they are subject to the legal process and whatever. And also the opportunity lost. I come off a plane and I decide I have to have this property. What if I was going to pay more? That famous 2-letter word, what if? And the difficulty is people just overlook all of that.
Quick question, perhaps a silly one, but bear with me. So booking deposit means it's under offer and sale agreed means you've signed contracts. Is that the difference?
No, under offer and sale agreed are the same thing. So under offer is about 8% off sale agreed, let's say. So under offer means if you have a property today and I've, let's say, gone through the bidding process or made an offer that's, gotten you to pause and reflect, and then let's say you ring up about it, the agent would generally say it's actually under offer at the moment, which means I've put an offer to the buyer, the seller, they're reflecting on whether to take it. And with sale agreed is literally where they take it, the booking deposit, but you would have, and I called it, I think it was on LinkedIn, silent sale agreed, which was that you'll have properties that are still for sale on Daft, but they've already been sold or have contracts signed. And either the agent doesn't have the stock to replace it, or the owners have asked them not to market sale agreed until they talk to all the various stakeholders or neighbours. So there's all the little things that people don't think of either. But yeah, so that's essentially how it works when it comes to under offer and sale agreed.
And then sale agreed, the next step is contract closing. In other words, that's the period where you're depending on the solicitors essentially and people moving ahead to actually close it. the contractual bit from which you cannot return. That's probably the final point.
Yeah. So once you've sent over your deposit, for example, that's when you have you're sent your sales advice notification. So your sales advice notification tells you what the booking deposit is, and then they ask for your solicitor's details, your details, and depending on the price point, anti-money laundering identification, just to prove that you exist essentially. Then what happens is you are invited to have a survey done. And if you have a mortgage, you generally have to have a survey done. If you're cash, you don't have to. But I think it's good for people to have a survey done because it gives them context. Because anything built by a human being is, by virtue of being human, is going to be flawed. That's not a good thing. That's not a bad thing. But if you're buying a period house and you're holding it to Tesla standards, you're holding yourself up for disappointment. So you need to get someone to give you clarity on that. Then after a survey is done, it goes into the legals. It can take anywhere from 10 days to 5 weeks for people to draw up the contracts. If deeds have to come out of the bank, if someone is sick, this is the other side of the stuff that people don't realize. And then when you move through the contracts, there's pre-contract inquiries where they go backwards and forwards confirming things, whether it's about title, whether it's about work that's been done that they don't have paperwork for. And then when you are invited in to sign your contracts, when you sign an exchange, which means you then send the next balance of your deposit, which is the larger sum, you then have binding contracts. So it's been signed and exchanged.
Okay.
That's when you then have a binding contract.
Okay. So that's the point at which legally you're going to have a problem if somebody decides, oh, actually, I've changed my mind, whether it's...
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Unless sometimes with mortgages, they have provisions that they allow for, a life event that happens. There's the kind of a death clause in it. But generally, it means that it's all bets are off. You have to go ahead with it.
Okay.
Thanks for listening to Taxbytes for Expats. Please do leave a rating or review wherever you listen to your podcast. And as always, remember to take professional tax advice specific to your personal circumstances before acting or refraining from action in connection with the matters dealt with in this series. The material in this podcast is intended to give general guidance only.